adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are in Fredericksburg, Texas, and we are visiting Fort Martin Scott, where some amazing history is about to unfold through our self-guided tour. So come along with me and let's get down this path. Martin Scott is open from 10 till 5. In other words, dusk till dawn. There's self-guided tours, and it is maintained by the city. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can call the city office. Here we go, guys. Fort Martin Scott. Now this site of Fort Martin Scott was established by the U.S. Army on December 5th, 1948 as a protection to travelers and settlers against the attack of Indians. This is kind of interesting because we learned just a while ago that originally this was called Fort Houston, but then it was renamed after one of the men who bravely fought and lost his life in this area. Now, visiting this site is absolutely free, but they do have an area where if you're interested in helping with the process of maintaining it, you can through this little donation box. So that's kind of a neat way to give back if you're interested in doing so without it just being in your face. It keeps the area for us free, and that's really nice. And in we go. Right here is our first opening to the gate that leads us inside, and it looks like there is a visitor center and museum. Like most sites that we visit, we have signs all around for our self-guided tour, which are going to tell us a little bit about the structures and also the history of the area and why it's important. So we're going to take the time to read these, and I'm going to take photos so that you can read them as well. Place them over on my blog. Now, if you do happen to want to come out to Fort Martin Scott, it is right around this main road that goes through town. It goes all the way out like you're going toward Johnson City. So as you get almost to the boundary of the community, it's right here, and there's a nice big parking lot. It's also right next to the Texas Rangers Heritage area. So that's over here, and yet another massive parking lot that you can find space in if you're a larger unit especially. This is pretty cool because it talks about the artist who documented the area, and it's talking about Captain Seth Eastman was an accomplished artist who drew some of the first pictorial records of the German settlement of Fredericksburg, but also of the fort. And this is kind of a representation of one of his renderings right here. I really like that this is accessible to anyone who comes to the area who is looking to further explore the rich history. Now, they do have several other museums within town that are pretty interesting about the culture of moving here and the German community, but this actually shows a very different side of the Fredericksburg area, and one that is very important to the overall picture of the state of Texas. It looks like we have arrived at the Visitor Center and Museum. It's this large building right here, and beside it we have a really cool stagecoach. See, guys? There's even a little box that you can step up onto to kind of look inside and see what it would have looked like. I bet this makes a perfect place to stop and take a selfie. We do have a sign-in area that we always sign in and make sure that we are accounting for where we're at. And then they have some passports. Now, if you watched my video from another location, you've already seen these, but here is a passport location, so you can pick up your stamp.
These are all the officers' quarters. There were 2 per building. There's a dog run in between, 1 on each side. This is the store and the warehouse for the store. This is the hospital. This is the laundry. This is the bakery. There's the guardhouse. Guardhouse down in this end has the cells. Be sure and look at the cells. They got to go in there and lay on the floor. It was pitiful. They didn't have many repeat offenders.
Okay guys, this is really important, and there's only two of them. There's one in Austin and one right here in Fredericksburg. This is a treaty stone, and it goes to tell a little bit more about the treaty stone right here. As you can see, this treaty was signed between the Southern Comanches, the Lipan, the Apaches, the Caddos, the Quapaws, and the Wichita subtribes, and representative of the United States, John H. Rowlands, special agent for the Indians of Texas. This was a peace treaty of sorts. And it's interesting because we think of treaties and we think of paperwork, but this was written in stone, quite literally. They also have these really cool free wooden nickels. That's kind of fun.
10 or 12 years ago. There were a couple of Sunday houses.
Very interesting.
From the area.
Okay, so inside the visitor center area, we had lots of information that was presented to us about what we're about to see. We're going to be going in this loop trail and actually check out all these buildings. Only one of these structures is the original structure that was actually on property, and it was saved by the family who actually bought this property following it being a fort. They built kind of around it to create their own home, and that is what ultimately saved the structure. Now, sites like this are super important because they paint a picture overall, and as you could see by the map, this site was pretty vast. It was only around for a few years. However, during that few years, it did a lot of different things to help this area. So, let's go see why. According to the map, this area back here is where we would have seen some of the livestock kept. As you can see, there's a little trough there, and that kind of is a good sign that we're going in the right direction. The dragoons. Now, I think this is a strange word, and I'm not exactly sure where it came from, but I think it's just always been one of those words that stood out to me in Texas history. But as you can see here, in February of 1849, 2 months after Captain Seth Eastman's infantry company established Fort Martin Scott, the dragoons were there and they helped to build the post around Fredericksburg. So the dragoons are these people right here, and this is where they might have had their exhausting horseback day come to an end, right over here. So within this area, all of the things that would have happened with the horses would have taken place. For example, this looks like it's a blacksmith area. You can see the big kettle over here, and inside this shop, I can only imagine all of the things that they would have kept for creating. Now, one of the things that is kind of neat about this particular area is they do have some different things that are reenacted and also displayed so that you can learn a little bit more periodically throughout the year. And this is one of them. So you have some benches right here where if you were coming out from one of those programs, you could sit there and check out what they're doing, which is really cool. It's a great way for you to learn a little bit more firsthand about the importance of the particular place that you're at, like the blacksmith. This sign right here talks a little bit more about that treaty of peace that was signed, and it shows a little illustration of what that might have looked like at the time when it was happening. Of course, there's more of a description down here even of what had happened in detail. Completely unrelated side note, look at the amazing trees that are around here. These things are huge and they have so much shade. These trees have been around alongside the history of this area, and they tell a story all their own. Over in this area, you can see something that we've seen several times at multiple locations. The beginnings of what looks to be a teepee structure and a fire ring right there in front. Now again, this does have an interpretive area, so sometimes they do come out here and share stories by the teepee. Now I really do encourage you to come out on the days where they have any kind of reenactments or people who are on property showing you the skills and things like that that it took to be here in this moment in the harsh times of reality at that point, because it just changes your perspective. The buildings do tell a story, and that story is very unique. However, when you are able to see a face and see an action, it does help a lot. If you go to, like for example, I went to a battlefield and they had the reenactors showing how the cannons fired and how that the soldiers would get out there and line up. It just makes it make more sense as to why some of the stories read the way that they do, and then also fills in the blanks of the things you might not have known. Remember how we spoke about a family had actually purchased this land right here? This is the family, and originally they purchased this property, 640 acres of it, for only $1,650. Now that was in 1870, so that was a lot of money at that point. But they were able to, from that point, go ahead and convert the guardhouse building, which is the one that we're about to look at, into their actual home. This is kind of what it looked like whenever they lived there. Now, at some point, a tragedy struck in 1884 when their property, which now included a saloon, a dance hall, a rodeo arena, and all sorts of other public spaces, was attempted to be robbed. At the time, the dad was there and he was actually shot and tragically killed. At that point, the family didn't continue business as usual with many of their established businesses and instead sold to the youngest son, who preserved the land and kept it in the family until the city of Fredericksburg purchased this plot of land for this particular historic site in 1959. So they had this for quite some time in their family, and not only was it a historic site, but it was also a thriving source of business in the area at one point in time. Now, I know that was a little bit of a longer story, but that one was probably one of the most important pieces of this entire puzzle out here. Now we're going to move inside the home, which has been reclaimed a bit to be, once again, the guardhouse. Inside we find some of the things that might have been here at the time, just different games. Not sure what that is, but it's a little creepy looking. And over here we have some different things as well. But now we're going to move into the super creepy area. This is the actual place where they would house those offenders when they had done wrong. Now, keep in mind, we were warned about this whenever we were in the main building. And this still existed in the actual home, just it was comparatively different looking. As you can see by this right here, we're going into the cells. Now, the cells are thought to be as they were when people would have been in them. It's dark, it smells weird, and this is exactly what people would have had if they were imprisoned here. That's it. Nothing else. Nothing. Been locked through these bolt systems like this with massive locks. As you can see, each one of these has one. And again, if you look inside, there's absolutely nothing here. Now, because of this, it was said that not many people would be repeat offenders because the conditions were deplorable and nobody wanted to go back once they got out. So even though this was crazy, apparently it worked. In here we have even more things that would have been here at the time of the fort. Now mind you, even though this was a home at one point, the things that would have made it the comforts of home have been removed. So this is more of the fort and less of the home. This includes a lot of things that were used to maintain the cannons that would have been here as well. And last but not least, we're moving into this room right here. And again, it's pretty bare bones. They have a fire, a couple of windows, and some just very minimal things. Now, there might have been a few more things in here at the time it was a fort. Maybe there might have been, but these are the basic items that it had. And Beyond that, there weren't a lot of design features like we have these days to make people feel good about themselves. Let's also note, by the amount of sweat that I have on me after entering this building, it is hot. It is very hot in here. These windows would have been opened up to allow air to pass through, but that was the only form of air conditioning that they had at these buildings. And just behind the fort, you'll notice that there is this nice, calm waterway right now. However, this doesn't always happen to be the case. Sometimes this thing gets crazy and does flood and gets a little nuts. But I can imagine that the reason that they built here was because they did have the water source directly behind them, and that probably made life a little bit easier living here. Now, we did learn before on this trip that part of the reason that Fredericksburg popped up in the area that it did was because there was the ability to foster new growth. They could plant things, the vegetation would thrive. And as you can see, we are here during a pretty decently hot month and everything is still green. A lot of Texas starts to have that ugly brown tone at some point because the moisture is just different there. But here, things always appear pretty green in hill country. And again, that's probably why the fort is also right here next to the water. Same reason. Now, this building has a cellar and then an actual entry point right here. And it looks like this area was an add-on lean-to onto the stone building right here. I was thinking this side might have had a door, but both doors are actually on that side over there. And it looks like this is a little hole into the basement for some ventilation. Now again, I'm no expert and I have no idea as to what the exact function of that building was. Could have been the spring house. It could have been a storage house. It could have just been a house of some kind where someone stayed in it. I don't know on that one. I'll have to go back and look at the map. Now then, this way you can see that there are several different places where formerly buildings had rested, and there are some signs which talk about those. But right here we have what would have been the same as their store. Now, we think of stores and we think of big chain stores like Walmart or even Target, where you go inside and you can find literally everything that you need. And this store had literally everything you need and was the size of a one-car garage. Now, when you'd go into these stores, literally they had everything that you needed, not everything you wanted. There is a huge difference between need and want. So you may be able to find meat, and it may not be consistently the same kind of meat each time that you go there. You also could find your basic necessities like eggs, cheese, butter, beer, all the things that a normal German person in that time would have wanted. Just maybe not that much of it, and maybe not on the basis that you would like it. I think that we can learn a lot from the past in this regard, in that sometimes our need versus want gets really messed up in the mix, and we forget that sometimes the things that we feel like we have to have aren't really necessities. Look at this store. If this could maintain an entire fort of people, then there's no reason that we can't all figure out how to get along in our massive grocery stores and be okay. This section right here is about uncovering the past. And you see this building right here, which would have been basically the officers' quarter of the times. This is kind of what we have now. It says here, for 1 week in May 1986, archaeologists from the Center for Archaeological Research at the University of Texas at San Antonio conducted a dig at Fort Martin Scott, and they located several different items. Amongst those items, they located these things. Just all sorts of different old, crazy looking things. Now in total, they found 754 different artifacts. That is crazy. 1 week of work, 754 artifacts. And they found those by searching at the base of what formerly was the fort area, and then some of the outer lying areas as well. But wow. Continuing onward, we have 2 more buildings ahead of us. Okay, we're going to move into another officer quarters. This one actually has a building that has been constructed for the site. Each one of these officers' quarters would have had an individual room for the officer, and then this area in between would separate them from yet another officer's room. And they could put their personal effects in there, anything that was a comfort from home, things like that. A lot of them had their own independent little wash tubs and things like that in there as well. And a fireplace was so important because they needed to be able to keep warm during the winter months. Now, when settlers came to the Fredericksburg area, it was not all roses and sunshine. Yes, the immigrants had finally made it to America and found their home. However, a lot of them were in poverty. They had nothing but the trunk of clothes that they had brought with them from Germany, and a lot of them didn't have an ability to make money at that moment because there was no industry. Everything was starting from scratch. Now, when the fort came along, it was said to be very helpful in regards to establishing the town and helping put it in the right direction for thriving a little bit more. They were able to work with the people and make sure they were also safe, and that was very helpful. And from there, Fredericksburg grew into the town we now see it to be some many years later. We're at about a 10,000 person town now, far different than the original hundreds that were here at that time. The last structure is also an officer's quarters. Being here at the fort was a volunteer enlistment, and this is what the paperwork might have looked like. And at the time, they didn't have pens like we did. They had these little ink fountains, and they would use a feather or a quill of some kind to sign. As you can see here, this is the Fort Martin Scott brochure pamphlet. And it tells a little bit more about the different things as well as the contact information. So if you are interested in having a special guided tour or taking part in one of their interpretive programs, make sure you check this out to get a little bit more information. The living history activities are quite special, and this is kind of an indicator as to what they might look like. Reenactments right here. Out there, look, see this picture right here? There's the flag, and right there is the flag. That's where it takes place, on this main grounds right here in the middle. Thanks for coming along with me to Fort Martin Scott here in Fredericksburg and learning about the rich history yet again of this awesome community. If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the bell for future notifications of uploads. It's been a great day, guys, but we're back on the road and have more things to do. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye!